And good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad you could join us this day after Memorial Day. Hope everyone had a nice long weekend. Well, today we've got a special guest with us, John Rossman, here for our Executive Next Practice interview. Just want to set the stage here for you first and make sure our technology is working. First of all, I'm Scott Hamilton, CEO of Executive Next Practice Institute, based at the University of California, Irvine, Beal Applied Innovation. We have been running this series now for some time and want to give you some background about what you're going to experience during this agenda today. During the course of this interview with John Rossman, we've got a Q&A function on Zoom. Most of you are familiar with that. You're probably zoomed out by now. Also, you've got a chat feature where you can chat with us privately. Please feel free to toss as many questions as you have to us, and we will address everything. This is a very interactive session. I've got a few questions for John, but we want to make this for about you. Who are we? Executive Next Practice Institute. Now north of 65,000 people attended over 400 of our sessions globally. Our whole purpose is this idea of first look at emerging trends, innovations, new value creation frontiers. And that's never been more true than now. We do what we call formation of next practices. That is, what are going to take us past the status quo and create new opportunities and potential strategic alliances for us. This is our link. Please bookmark this site. You're going to see changes virtually every day on the website itself, and we're always adding events, both live and soon in-person events. Here's your value proposition for joining us. First, and I see many of you have been with us for many years on this call. I see people I see CEOs, board members. I see people from Mexico, Canada joining us today. The value proposition has always been about this connection to C-suite leaders of enterprise companies. Normally, our attendees are small to mid-cap to large-cap companies that have an established platform, that are innovating, but need the additional help and perspective across the industry. We provide this kind of relevant information to key decision makers, and frankly, no other place has it like this. In fact, we mix across industry sectors and we look at the entire C-suite. So we look for this quality and these top contributors, and you'll see that every single time, whether it's these types of interviews we're having or our regular sessions. And then finally, as I mentioned, these are global, small to large cap companies that you'll see. Just a couple of updates. Here's what's coming. One of Marshall Goldsmith's partners is Sally Hutchinson, and she's coming to join us on June 16th to talk about her book, How Women Rise. So be sure to mark that on your calendars now. That's June 16th, same time here, 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. East Coast. Also, our reInvent HR Summit, which is for the entire C-suite. Again, that's for the entire C-suite. That will be broadcast from UCI on July 16th. Please join us for that. If you need more information about that, just email or call us. Stay connected with us. Again, our next sessions are at the URL. Be sure to bookmark that, join our newsletter, subscribe to our TV channel, which has all the videos, including the video of this session that'll be posted in about 2 days. And join as an annual member. The annual membership, which includes the live events, which will be returning. The membership joining now will cover you through 2021. All right, here's where we're at. We're all linked by this train wreck that we're in. Still a very, very tough situation. We again thank all our first responders, our healthcare professionals that are helping us get through this, but we are all linked in this and we're all impacted. Here's what our CEO members are telling us, and we just polled 3,000 of them last month. Here were the big 3 items from our CEO perspective. Number 1, they were concerned about burn rate, conserving cash, capital, conserving resources to get through this. Number 2, switching to a virtual workplace, a virtual workforce, and all the challenges of doing that. What are the physical and emotional limitations of working in a virtual environment? How do you maintain spontaneity? How do you come up with innovations in this kind of dispersed environment? Number 3, customers. Customers' value proposition is shifting, and it's shifting fast, and their buying patterns are shifting fast. You only need to look at the airline automobile industry, rental cars, hospitality, retail, all of it's shifting extremely quickly. So that's why I'm so delighted that we're able to have John with us today to talk about this from not only the Amazon perspective, but from all the various companies he's seen over the years. John is, he's author of a couple of great books, Think Like Amazon, 50 and a Half Ideas to Become a Digital Leader. He's managing partner at Rossman Partners, a digital strategy and operations improvement consulting firm. Prior to that, he was at Amazon, where he launched the marketplace business and ran the enterprise services business. He's obviously a sought-after speaker on creating a culture of operational excellence and innovation. We're delighted to have him here today. And he serves as senior innovation advisor to T-Mobile and a board advisor to Turbine Supply Clinic and several others. And he lives here locally in San Clemente. With that, John, I'm going to have you join us. Good morning.
Good morning. I've got my coffee here, so I'm good to go.
Fantastic. Excellent. We all need it after that 3-day weekend, and at least we got some fresh air. We were talking about some beach walks and finally starting to enjoy a little bit of the opening. So I want to just, first of all, how are you faring in the current environment?
Well, we're awfully lucky, right? Our family's together. Everyone's staying kind of productive. We've got good work to do, and we're able to be safe. And so we're very lucky and appreciate all that everybody else is doing to keep the wheels going on things.
Yeah, I know. It's tough, and it's day by day, isn't it? This is one of those times where you can think about scenario planning, looking at the future, but it's really a day-to-day slog, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it does create the opportunity to be mindful, both grateful and mindful about what's the future? What's the future for you? What's the future for your organization? What's the future for your industry? And that's really what this book is about. And all I do is I kind of go this book isn't about Amazon. It's about what others can take from a company like Amazon and apply into their own cultures and own business. And so much of what we can learn about Amazon is about how they define and work in the future as well as deliver for today.
It's so true. And what we did is you talked about the book. So you've got 50 and a half ideas. So I went through it, a fantastic read, by the way. And I pulled out some of the ideas. I wanted to talk about a few of these because it as I mentioned to you in our correspondence, some of the things you talk about or some of the topics we've talked about at Executive Next Practices now for 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
And this idea of moving past the status quo and creating these next practices. So we're speaking the same language. And of course, both of us have been leaders in large companies. I was with Nestle, DirecTV, and others. And so we've had that large enterprise perspective. But you've got this idea number 2 that I thought really connected with what we're in right now. And the comment in your idea here was, you'll stick through the hard times if you're passionate about the cause and the customer. Consistent messaging regarding the mission, the purpose that is, will take mildly interested majority of employees in most organizations and make them fanatics for your business, for winning, and for the mission.
Yeah, so that's, idea 2 is called mercenary or mission driven. And it really stems from, Bezos' perspective of hey, mission driven teams deliver better. But the challenge is we don't all start there, right? Right. And so the opportunity and the challenge, the work that a leader has to do is both define what the organizational mission is and consistently connect it to the work that teams are doing and find ways to make it personal for people. And if you do that on a repeated basis, that's what culture is, right? The things you do all the time. If you do that all the time, over time, that becomes part of the DNA. Being mission driven becomes part of the DNA. People don't walk in the door with that. And I think so many times, I hear about people trying to interview for that. And it's I think that's a little limiting and misguiding. I think that's the stuff you shape over time.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Again, it gets back to this idea, just that core purpose. And John, if you probably have heard some of our sessions, we've been, again, reminding our CEOs that this idea of communicating your mission, communicating the purpose right now over and over is so critical to make sure people are on the same page.
And you've got to be, an expert at these communication techniques of having kind of, maybe it's an Uber, vision or mission statement, but then how do you create that into the sub messages and examples? And then how do you put together kind of the operating principles and the structures and the measures, your operating system that connect into that? If any of those things are out of alignment, then people will know, like, yeah, we kind of talk about this as a mission, but the things we do on a daily basis don't live up to that, right? And that's the real, disconnect that happens oftentimes, is like, we kind of say one thing, but we do not operate on it every single day. And I think that's one of the unique things that Amazon has done is they're a massive organization today, right? But they have a set of principles that helps everybody know, like, this is how you think through things, so that they don't become a bureaucracy, and people will think through situations in generally the same framework. And that's the power of having principles and mission, is like, your goal is to get other people aligned with your thinking and thinking that way without you being in the room.
Yeah, it's so true. And the one other thing before we move on here was that we've cautioned our CEO members in particular about week 4 of the COVID crisis. You felt like you were in pretty much alignment. Now we're in week 12. Things are starting to slip. So it's even more important now as we go into these summer months to maintain that communication. The other thing, the other idea here, all the ideas are fantastic, but this is another one that kind of stood out for me. And this one's really important in terms of not only startups, but again, the large scale enterprises, and that is craft a compensation structure that really ties into the value creation. That is, communicate the strategy and value of your communication structure often to build alignment. And when these shifts occur, dramatic shifts in the compensation structure become necessary.
Yeah, so, this idea is compensation strategy, ownership for everyone, compensation strategy to drive enterprise optimization. So a few things kind of packed in there. First of all, it's like, your goal is to drive enterprise optimization. Like, be clear about that. The mechanics of how you do that, there's no one set of mechanics to do that. But I do think, like, it's pretty easy to rally around, like, our goal is to optimize enterprise valuation. Amazon's approach for doing that is like simple salary structures, low salary structures in general, but stock ownership for everybody. And that's created long-term alignment that the only thing that matters is enterprise valuation and optimization, not team, not individual, not P&L, none of that stuff. And so, again, there's lots of great mechanics on how to do that, but just gain clarity of, like, this is one of those supporting structures. Like, it won't make or break your organization, but if you get these things right, then you're going to have the dominoes in effect, right? That operating system that you need that steers you in the right direction versus something that's counter to the mission that you're trying to achieve. And Amazon's approach on that is like, everybody wins mightily when the enterprise wins. And the second orientation of that is long-term orientation. And when you can create an organization that is struggling every day for the right types of results, but it's also keeping their eye on long-term value creation, like, that's what creates a legacy organization.
Yeah, so true. And again, it's just a great reminder about those underlying platforms, those underlying structures that are so critical to maintaining the business and maintaining momentum.
I think especially at the executive team basis, kind of like, I've got another idea in there about, avoiding the country club. And especially with teams that have been successful, keeping those teams hungry and taking the right types of risks to grow is closely aligned to that compensation structure and everything. And what I see in big organizations, they start kind of getting more and more conservative because that executive team, their primary orientation is, how do I preserve creation versus make more of it? And that works against kind of this notion of stewardship for the next generation.
Yeah, it's that old desire again, going back to the status quo, to getting to a level of comfort, isn't it? That stands in our way. This other point, and this is something again we've been talking about at E&P now for a decade, but you've really put a point on it. And this whole idea about thinking about your core capabilities and how they might be offered or structured as a platform to help you identify a future business strategy. Now, again, we know that's not for all companies, but deeply understanding your core capabilities in terms of how it might take you forward in terms of improvement and innovation.
Yeah, so the chapter is called So You Want to Be a Platform Company, Platform Strategy for the Rest of Us. And you kind of touched on it, which is even if being a platform company isn't in your future, thinking through the exercise of how would I take my core capabilities, make them competitive for having external clients, how to provide high level SLAs, cost competitive, feature rich, those will give you insights into improving your capabilities, right? So a platform company is somebody who takes components and has external clients. That mindset is what's driven, a large part, driven Amazon to be the conglomerate company that it is today versus just being a retailer. Was how do we build things for ourselves but have external customers also leverage it? It makes us be better. And so this is one I work with a lot of clients on, is how to really identify what your core capability should be. If it's not core, how much do we really want to invest? Is there a better way to partner, to vendor strategize this? If we do need to be unique on this, like this is our superpower, how do we truly raise the game? Thinking it through as a platform service is one of the ways that you generate ideas for radical improvement.
Yeah, and it's again, that's one of the things we've noticed consistently across industry sectors, this idea that people get somewhat myopic. Also, they're just looking within their own industry. They don't understand their core capabilities, and therefore they're not able to leverage the new opportunity, even when it's staring them right in the face.
And when the only feedback you're getting is internally, guess what? We're all friends, right? Nobody's going to be too demanding. Having external customers is a more demanding way to get feedback on your capabilities. Everybody's familiar with Amazon Web Services, AWS. That came from a bad holiday season we had in 2003. Website was tipping over all the time. So we were like, okay, we're gonna create horizontal infrastructure services for all the teams. And it was Bezos who said, that's great, but I want you to have external customers, because only external customers are gonna be demanding, because you all wanna get along together, right? You're not demanding on each other. And what they found was developers loved that externalized capability. And so they stumbled into this cloud business. That's the questions you should be making, is how do I get more critical feedback for what I think I'm really good at? And that's, again, like where the ideas and the critical thinking and challenging your assumptions comes from.
Yeah, it's interesting too. By the way, John, we had a terrific interview last week with a couple of professors out of Texas A&M about executive decision making, and they made the point you're just making, is that you need to challenge yourself and get the contrarian thinking. And also, they made the point, in this virtual environment where we're trying to make decisions in a virtual environment, people have a public face and they have a private face, so they're less likely to challenge you in many cases. If we have these conferences about a major decision, they're less likely to share their private opinion.
Well, that's the primary challenge that CEOs and leaders have, is getting honest, critical feedback from people, right? But who's always willing to give you honest, critical feedback? It's your customers, right? And that's why thinking about how do I externalize things, like that's a mechanism, a mind game you can play to think about what that critical feedback might be. Yeah. Even if you don't go down the path of creating platform strategies.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There was another idea here you had, that when most of us hear this word innovation or innovate, we think about technology innovation. But most of Amazon's most impactful innovations, of course, have not been necessarily from technology, but how you leveraged it. And the real innovation has been reducing customer friction. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I kind of always picture myself in the Wayback Machine. It's like, what were, Amazon's truly fundamental innovations? And a bunch of them were like selling new used products next to new products on the same detail page. That was revolutionary in the day. Putting authentic customer reviews on detail page, unfiltered, critical customer reviews had never been done before. Shipping in 2-day windows, right? Amazon was called irresponsible, unsustainable when they launched free everyday shipping in 2000. These things that today are like obvious, we're truly like business model innovations, but they were all centered on this idea of reducing friction, make it easier for the customer to get to the goal of what the customer is truly trying to get to. Amazon today, one of the things I think is so interesting is they continue to innovate in product returns, right? Like most companies wouldn't think about like, well, how do I make returns even easier? But that's the counterintuitive nature of reducing customer friction is you're gonna come up with ideas that actually in the short term feel like they work against your P&L. But if you think about the long term and how do I create viral, trusted customer lifetime value, taking those counter moves will oftentimes set you up for those things. So friction is the little stuff that we ask customers to do. I always refer to the Pink Floyd song, Comfortably Numb. You're oftentimes comfortably numb with these little things that you ask customers to do. And that's why you've got to really dive deep into the customer persona, really understand their pain points, understand their day, understand the job to be done much bigger than what your product or service participates in, and then understand like, well, what are the little things that person, that customer is having to do in order to accomplish their mission? You will get a ton of great ideas. And then the second part of that is when you start tackling the little problems, you build the critical mindset and you build the capability to be able to solve them. And those are the skills that allow you to make the big leaps. Don't think, championship athletes aren't made at the championship tournament, right? Championship athletes are made by doing the work in the gym every single day. So reducing friction is like going to the gym every day, right? We're getting better, we're solving problems, we're solving little problems. It prepares you for those championship moments.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the whole initiative around reducing friction in the returns process, because we've known it's been good already, but even since COVID-19, since the past 12 weeks, there have been dramatic changes in return policy. So such that they've got a 7-day no exchange of fee policy on apparel. If you want something, you get it. You don't even tender a credit card. If you decide to keep the piece of apparel after 7 days, great, then you get charged. Or they send you a return label. The return process itself has become even more streamlined just in the past 10, 12 weeks. So you're right, it's amazing how the lengths and breadths they go to making these processes even easier.
And it's just little tiny things that doesn't impact the entire customer base, sometimes just little slices of the customer base. But man, they daisy chain these things together. And then over time, it's like, wow, they are so easy to do business with, right?
Yeah.
That's why we are where we are today. It wasn't built overnight.
Oh, it's incredible. And then one other idea I just want to touch on here, and that is the launch and learn. Let's see if we have here. Yeah, again, as you know, our organization's set up. By design, we put different industry sectors together in a room. So you're not, quote unquote, talking to each other, but you're looking across the whole periphery. So you talk about this idea of launch and learn new industries and adjacencies to your existing businesses. That is, find a way to get started in a new business, and from there, trying to find a way to expand it, not just the size of the business, but the ways you participate in the value chain of the whole industry.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you look over the course of Amazon's history, I mentioned one way they've grown into this conglomerate is through platform services. The other major move they do is what we called at Amazon Launch and Learn. And what that meant was we're going to get into a new category, a new geography, a new business line, partnering with others. We're going to launch the business, And then over time, we're going to learn the broader industry, not just our little part, the broader industry. And we're going to figure out, like, where does the customer experience suck? Where's there's a ton of friction? Where's their excess margin? And where do we think a horizontally connected experience would provide a much better value proposition? And then they're willing to take action on it. Sometimes that upsets partners, right? Like I like there is the counter aspect to this, but that mindset of just you're never done with something. You're always figuring out, how do we expand? And starting off though with little steps like a partner move is a great way to do it. The number of businesses that Amazon has launched with this idea is astounding. I got to run one of those businesses at Amazon. I ran the toys business. One of the businesses I ran was the toys business. We partnered with Toys R Us, and everything, right? They gave that business to us. Where's Toys R Us today? Where's the Amazon toy business at today, right? Like, that shows you what the power of this mindset is.
Yeah, it's incredible for anybody in terms of how you look. Again, getting outside of your own box, getting outside of your own industry, and just amazing things are out there. And it's these collisions of different ideas that create the new opportunities, right?
That's right. And typically the best orientation around that is to put the customer at the center and really understand, what is the customer trying to achieve? And that gives you kind of an anchor to explore these types of ecosystem partnering opportunities.
Yeah, so let's get into a couple of general questions here. And then through the audience, to our viewers, again, please use the Q&A function or the chat feature, and we'll be glad to respond to your questions. So let's talk about a couple of things here, John. Amazon clearly has demonstrated how nimble it is during this pandemic. What do you attribute that to? I mean, it's incredible. It's so far and above anybody else. What's behind that?
Well, it's no one factor, right? Like, everybody wants, asks a really good question like that, and they kind of want, like, well, what's the move to do? And there's not one move to do. I think it's a combination of super crisp decision-making, an organization that is low bureaucracy, and every function feels and talks and acts like the owner of that function. So they get a direction. They know, I have to internalize it, I have to operate it. And then this universal layer of metrics and service level agreements, SLAs, that orientates everybody, and that they've compartmentalized their organization. So they've built technology and teams that are in these compartments, right? So, two pizza team is one type of compartmentalized team at Amazon, not the only type. And it's that combination of, like, crisp decision-making, teams that don't wait for others to interpret signals like that, decisions like that from the executive team, and then a set of metrics, instrumentation up and down the organization that synchronizes the choreography relative to that. And then, underpinning all of that is this notion of kind of long-term thinking, right? The short-term hits that they took in their business, and they did take short-term hits in their business in order to shift into essential items. Everybody realized, like, the country needs us, right? Our customers need us. And B, the long term is what we're focused on. Who cares about this quarter, right? So, one of the things I loved, it was classic Bezos move, right? If you saw the last operating quarter, he started off with, investors ought to take a seat, right? Because what he was saying was, we are going to take all 4 billion of our operating profits from this quarter, and we're going to invest them into COVID-related employee safety and supply chain safety initiatives, right? The short term doesn't matter. It's all about the long term. And it's that combination, and nimble is the right word there, right? Quick shifts that allow you to respond to a situation, and then put in the investments and the learning mechanisms, like, okay, what have we learned? What's the opportunities? And then double down in those going forward. And so I think what you'll see out of Amazon coming out of this is, like, oh, there's a lot of stuff we learned through this period of time, and they are going to invest I think one of the things they'll do is they will be one of the most and safety aware supply chains that in the world, in the competition, right? And so they'll be able to distinguish to customers, like, we understand transparency and the authenticity of our supply chain better than anybody else. And that will mean something to customers.
Yeah, well, kind of related to this, and maybe this is some of the secret sauce you can share with us, and that is bureaucracy. How does an organization the size of Amazon able to move that fast? I mean, again, I come out of large companies, Nestle, DirecTV, Aramark, Honeywell, where we had dozens of layers of executives and teams. So
yeah,
what makes Amazon different?
So the first is, like, Amazon's not perfect. And you know, you could say, like, you know, it's better than most organizations on these things, right? So there is an aspect of bureaucracy. Sometimes that's kind of purposeful. But if you ask me, like, John, what is Jeff Bezos really concerned about? And he has been concerned about this for a long time. It's about bureaucracy, like slowing down, not having small teams, not having accountability, not having teams that care, not having fun, right? Like, it's not fun to be in a bureaucratic organization. So a lot of these concepts, these ideas come from this notion of, like, you know, even though we are a big organization, we believe in entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs come from small teams that care. And so a lot of these things come from that small team. We got to care, got to measure, and got to digitize our capability. And those are some of the ways that Amazon avoids bureaucracy. And then I'll go back to the compensation concept we talked about, right? Everybody optimizing for enterprise optimization, not team optimization. That's another part of the move. And then they spend an enormous amount of time, not just operating in the present, but debating what is the future and what are the things we can do, small bets and big bets, in order to make that future. And then they're very deliberate on, well, we've got 10 ideas. We can only do 2 of them. These are the 2 we're doing. We're all in on those, right? And so that whole idea of working in the future, which a lot of the chapters in this book are devoted to, is about, like, what most teams do well is they focus on short-term results, right? This quarter, this year, today. What most organizations don't do is they're not deliberate in how they innovate, how they create the future. They don't devote the time. They don't devote the resources. When it becomes hard, they pull away from it. They don't understand the nature of failure when you're experimenting. Like, they don't understand all of that stuff. They talk about it, but they don't do it. They don't practice it, right? And so Amazon is one of the best at actually practicing how you innovate. And those are some of the secrets I try to unlock in the book.
Yeah, a really interesting perspective. And you kind of touched on this. We talked about decision-making too. And you outlined kind of an interesting decision-making concept used at Amazon called one-way versus two-way doors.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah. So the concept is, you know, one-way door is one that when you go through it, you can't come back, right? A two-way door is when you can go through, you can learn something, and you can adjust if you need to. And just recognizing, like, hey, decisions can be one-way door decisions or two-way door decisions. That's an insight. 2 is what most of us do is we make what truly should be a test and learn type of scenario, a two-way door decision. We make them into one-way door decisions. And so you got to be aware of that. Like, okay, break it down. How would we test it? How do we make it smaller? And then the third thing is just, like, good hygiene, good awareness on, like, how do we get decisions made at the right layer of the organization? So if I understand what are truly two-way door decisions, those are easier to push to the edge, right? Push to the teams that are closest to the customer to make decisions. But when it's a one-way door decision, well, those are the things we need to bring to the center. We need to have more deliberate conversations about, right? And if you do those things, guess what? Decision-making speeds up. You have better accountability to those decisions, and you're growing better leaders for tomorrow.
It's so true. And a couple of our viewers also, you touched on something earlier called the two pizza team. How is that connected to innovation?
So a two pizza team, some of the press has this wrong. They talk about two pizza meetings. It's not a two pizza meeting, it's a two pizza team. A two pizza team is a team that owns a core capability, right? So we talked about this platform strategy. You break these down into small services a two pizza team owns a service. It could be something like the image service or the payment service or key back office function like the inventory receive. They own defining, building, and operating a core capability that gets used across Amazon and oftentimes by external customers. So that two pizza team has a long-term product ownership mindset, but they also have to operate it. And so they have this duality of, I have to create quality and stability and scalability today, but I'm always thinking about how do I add more value to the customer? How do I innovate long-term? And so when you have these two, the whole organization is made up of these little two pizza teams, guess what? They can iterate and they can progress faster, not perfectly, but faster than when you have a monolithic architecture and a monolithic organization and everything has to come to center in order to make decisions on like what new features, what new capabilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, we have heard that story the wrong way from the press. So thanks for clarifying that whole dynamic. So what do most companies get wrong about innovation in general?
Well, it depends on the company. Two things I'll focus on. First is they don't understand when we're talking about, fail fast, fail forward, like they confuse that term failure with like sloppy delivery, sloppy execution, that type of failure, right? When we're talking about failure in innovation, we're talking about guided experimentation, right? Deliberate A/B tests, having a hypothesis, testing for that hypothesis. And so when I work with teams, like we tend not to use that term of fail fast or fail forward, those things, because the term gets confused in the organization. So we talk about experimentation. So they don't understand the nature of experimentation. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I'll talk about is that when they do have a winning idea, right? We've tested this idea out, it's ready to go. What most organizations do is they prematurely scale it, right? They start making big bets, they commit to budget, they commit to the press, they commit to customers when you truly haven't figured everything out about it, right? The unit costs, the operating perspectives, the rollout perspectives, the maintenance perspectives, like you haven't really figured out. And so it's kind of this case of premature scaling. And so you see a lot of promising things and people get impatient and they scale it before it's ready. So those are two things that bigger organizations get wrong in innovation. The third thing I'll mention is decision-making pace, right? Like the pace at how you need to make decisions when you are talking about a portfolio of small investments needs to be completely different than your normal corporate. And an example is like procurement or legal review. You have to be able to make procurement and legal decisions much faster than you do in your normal corporate layer. And so that's the type of decision-making pace that you need to have when you're thinking about innovating on a portfolio of bets versus your normal operating procedures.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. And in fact, procurement itself keeps coming up when we do these private next practice sessions with our members and others. That continues to come up. Both the bureaucracy, but also one
of my friends who's a client is always like, John, I'm just going to make you be chief procurement officer for a while so that, you tell us all the things that are wrong. Why don't you come and fix it? Yeah. That's one of the hidden capabilities of organizations is, and I write about it in the book, right? There's a chapter called Get to Yes, support teams that matter, right? Whether it's a finance team, an HR team, a tax team, a legal team, a procurement team, so many of those expert-based, matrixed organizations, their general MO, the way they typically approach things is like, I'm going to tell you the rules, you, the business owner, have to figure out how to fit within the rules. Versus that's kind of the get to know perspective, right? A get to yes perspective is like, I am an expert in this. I do know the rules. My job as the expert is to get you to yes. It sounds like you're kind of mincing words here. I'm not. It's a distinctly different mindset and orientation for those support teams to invigorate them and empower them. Like your job is to get ideas to yes. Makes all the difference in the world when you're trying to innovate.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's another thing that surfaced in the past 12 weeks, and that is in the support teams in particular. when it comes to regulatory compliance.
Right.
And just even the shutdown itself, instead of focusing on what can you do, there's too much of a focus on what you can't do. And again, this is a common complaint we've heard from our CEOs. They say, from our teams, I need a path forward. I don't
you need problem
So,
solvers, right? Like that's, you know, if I ever get asked like, John, what are you actually good at? You know, and it's like, yeah, I'm a pretty good problem solver, you know, and I think that's the essential skill of both small scale innovation and big scale orientation is like, how do we solve problems differently, you know, faster in a real nature, get to the root cause. And that problem solving techniques is not only where you get good ideas, but how you actually deliver them.
Yeah. Well, what's the, and again, we'll take Q&A from the audience, but what is you got the 50 and a half ideas. What's the half idea from the book?
That great question. Other than a great marketing idea that my business partner brought to me on that. So the half idea is like, again, the purpose of this book isn't about Amazon. It's about the reader. And here's 50 authentic things from Amazon that they do to get their results. These doesn't mean it's the right things for you, and doesn't mean you should apply all 50. So the half idea is back to the reader. What are you willing to do differently? Here's 50 ideas. Which ones are you willing to put a patient, concerted, consistent effort on in order to change the culture, the tone, the tempo, the practices of your organization? And so the half idea is kind of back to the reader of like, what are you willing to do differently?
Yeah. Yeah. And, what about kind of related to that? One of our viewers, international viewers, has got a question in terms of what do you recommend people do right now? Where should the focus be at this stage of the game?
Well, great question. So after I left Amazon, I was a partner at a firm called Alvarez and Marcel for more than 10 years. And A&M is a crisis management restructuring firm. And I loved operating that environment because clients in crisis are willing to actually change. There's two rules when you're in a crisis, right? And your setup slides kind of touch on this. The first is manage cash, right? So collect all the cash you can, forget profits, take in debt, do whatever you can to fortify the balance sheet. That's rule one, right? Rule two is never waste a good crisis. Like, take advantage of this, make the hard decisions, lean into the future, cut the things that are yesterday's business that aren't the future. And that's the way you take advantage of this situation. So those would be the two things that I would say is like job one is, you know, preserve cash, and job two is lean into the future. There was a great headline in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago, and it was talking about the shift to online grocery. And the headline was, crises have a way of accelerating the future. And I think that is an essential insight across the board, which is, you know, this pandemic, like it's forcing us to address what's the future and what's the past. And so that's my encouragement is like, once you've taken care of kind of the balance sheet, take care of dealing with the future and dealing with the past.
No, that's such a great comment too, and keep people focused and moving and looking at that future. As I mentioned, alluded to earlier, and this is fresh information this morning from our CEO members, is that, again, people are tending to lose a bit of momentum. They're getting a bit discouraged, losing focus. So this is really a time, to your point, to keep the eye on the ball.
You know, I think it's easy to adapt that mindset when you start focusing on your own problems. And one of the perspectives I always had is like, you know, if you want to create a positive attitude, like focus on other people's problems, like your customers, solving for the future, you know, and that would be my best advice, like, because that is real. I suffered from it, you know, and everything, right? And it's like, okay, do something constructive. And I think that's the best way to help battle kind of that combination of kind of complacency and the great unknown that we have.
Yeah. Well, again, those are great advice. And again, I want to really appreciate you coming on the show today. We'd love to have you back, and hopefully in an environment
next time.
Yeah, we need to have those in-person meetings. We're working on it as fast as we can to get it into a safe environment. But so tell us, how do we get the book? It's a fantastic read.
Well, it's available in hardcover. Here's one here. It's available in Kindle, and it's available in audio. I've actually gotten a lot of compliments on the audio version. Of course, you can get it at Amazon. 60% of all books are sold at Amazon. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other independent bookstores, but Amazon's the easiest. So.
Well, I got to tell you this, John. I literally get hundreds of books sent to me every year, as you know, because I interview a lot of people. And that's one of the books I actually read. And it's so practical, so relevant for right now. So we really appreciate you coming out with this book.
Well,
It's fantastic.
I always tell people, like, all I did was pay attention in class, right? Like, I just learned so much there. And my mission has just been helping to share that with others. That's my goal with my work. That's the goal with the books and everything, is just like, what can you take from Amazon? And I've really focused on how to break them down into individual components so that you can actually act on them. So all I did was pay attention in class.
Yeah, well, obviously did a great job of that.
For the first time in my life, yes.
Well, enjoy, and thanks again for being with us. And we'll look forward again to seeing you very soon. Hope you stay safe, healthy, and we'll look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Thanks for having me. Hope everybody's doing well.
Thanks again, John. Thanks very much. All right, if our viewers will hang on, we'll tell you how you can get involved with us here going forward. And again, thanks for our viewers for your feedback on this series. We're gathering several hundred people a week are watching these. We'll look forward to seeing you on the 16th. But again, check out the website, and I'll put it up here with our relevant links. And we'll look forward to seeing you at these upcoming sessions. Again, thank you for being with us today.